Okay, Liz, well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and welcome everybody to this afternoon's session on the innovation landscape. So to start off, I'll just put my BP hat on for a second and just make the comment really that, you know, one of the principal reasons that BP is domiciled here in the UK is really the quality, the excellence of the UK innovation ecosystem. And that's reflected in the fact that we invest some 40+% of our R&D investment here in the UK with 3 major research centres. But of course it's not just about BP, it's about other companies, and many other companies choose to do the same. And that's good for the UK because that creates inward investment, and it's good for exports because this drives many of the technology-driven exports that the UK is engaged in. And so there's no doubt about the quality of the UK innovation ecosystem. But there's been some reviews recently that have looked at this, and including amongst those are the NERST and the Dowling reviews. And many of the recommendations from those are enshrined in the latest version of the Higher Education Bill, which is making its way through Parliament right now. And as part of that, we have the formation of UK research and innovation. So it's really timely, actually, and I'm delighted to be moderating this discussion this afternoon. And we have, you know, some really good people to talk into this subject. So we have Ruth McKernan, who's the CEO of Innovate UK. We've got Sir John Kingman, who's the interim chairman of UKRI. We've got Philip Nelson, who this afternoon is wearing his hat as the chair of the Research Council's executive group. And we've got Stian Westlake, who's going to bring a really interesting perspective on the international elements of this. So let's get going. And really, I just wanted to start with a first question, and I wanted to direct this to you, Stian, about you know, what are the strengths of the UK innovation ecosystem? And I touched upon that a bit in my introduction. And what makes it a great place to grow and start a business? And where are there gaps and opportunities in your mind?
I think there's 3 things that make the UK a really good place to invest in innovation and start innovative companies. The first thing is the prodigious strength in technology and research. Whether we look at academic research or research in business, the UK really outperforms. We punch above our weight in terms of whether published academic research or business research. I think the second thing I would highlight is the real range and strength of thriving industrial clusters that we have, whether it's in big industries like oil and gas or advanced manufacturing, or whether it's in smaller emerging sectors that you might not think of as such traditional tech sectors, like video games or other aspects of the creative industries. And then I think the third thing, and I say this particularly in the context of the great international audience we have here today, is that the UK has always been and will continue to be a very open innovation system. We have the largest amount of foreign-funded R&D going on in the UK of any country. That's something we're really committed to. We are, after the US, the biggest research partner with China, something that we're keen to develop more on, and we're very keen to develop more partnerships. Now, we don't want to be complacent. We recently saw that in one of these, if you follow these innovation indices that keep getting published, we dropped behind Switzerland. We went from 1st to 3rd place recently. But that's one of the reasons why I think it's so good to see that the UK government is now doing more and more to promote innovation, not just through funding research, as the UK government has always been committed to doing, but through the continued work of Innovate UK, and most interestingly now with the formation of UKRI, which has a vital role to play in joining up, focusing and carrying forward that agenda.
So Stian, thank you very much, and actually that's a great segue into you, John, really, to sort of give a flavour of how do you see UKRI fitting within this landscape.
Well, thanks for asking. I think it's very important to start with the context, which is set entirely by the fact that we have a new government to all intents and purposes, and we have the consequences of the Brexit vote. And all of that sets a completely different context for the organisation that I've been asked to set up and create. Because we have, I think, a critical moment of opportunity as this new government thinks about what are going to be the critical building blocks of the economic future of the United Kingdom as an independent country outside the European Union, this is the moment at which we have to put the case that science and innovation is absolutely central to that. And I think that argument makes itself. As Stian says, there are just extraordinary assets in this country. But we shouldn't, we should be quite clear. There's a kind of passing bus here, and we have to hop on this bus. And that's, absolutely what I have been doing in terms of putting UKRI together. What can UKRI do as a kind of new arrival on the scene? I mean, the first thing we must do is not divert everyone with a kind of massive bureaucratic restructuring, which is completely unnecessary. What we have in this country is a set of funding institutions, 9, of which Innovate UK is one. And what I've been tasked to do is to essentially put on top of those organisations a small, lean, strategic body that thinks about priorities, but critically, for the first time ever, is an organisation which can put the case for what we have in this country in the science innovation space, what the potential is, the challenges are, and absolutely to put the case for funding in this area. And when Theresa May says, we need a new industrial strategy, as I say, I think we absolutely must be at the heart of that. The other thing I think UKRI can do goes to this word that Bob and Stian have both used, which is a sort of ecosystem. The world, I don't need to tell this audience, the world is not cleanly divided between somehow the pure pursuit of knowledge in universities at one extreme and exciting innovation in companies at the other. Actually, what we've got here is a system. It's a system which I think over time has become increasingly populated. The sort of terrain in between my two extremes has become increasingly populated with all sorts of very exciting opportunities and interventions. I was looking the other day at the success of the biomedical catalyst, for example, which Philip Hammond chose to invest in. I think it's a really good sign that he chose to invest in it. And it's a classic. It's a partnership between Innovate UK and the research councils. And I want to see more of those kinds of partnerships because I think that, as I say, this territory in the middle is incredibly exciting and has a lot of potential. But we also have to bear in mind that these are separate institutions for a reason. And Innovate UK does have a kind of different role in the system, a different culture, a different customer base. Many of you here today who work with Innovate UK know that very, very well. And I think we have to preserve that and nurture it and not mess it up.
Thank you, John. So I want to bring in Ruth and Philip now because, the research councils and Innovate UK, you've been working together. You have a long track record of working together. So it'd be interesting to hear from you about how you think UKRI is going to help to further develop that kind of working relationship. So Ruth, do you want to say something first?
Yeah, I'll go first, certainly. So we've always worked very closely with the research councils. The challenge and the way that our competitions are written are focused at businesses. 80% of our funding goes to businesses, but very often it requires fundamental research to address that challenge. And sometimes it requires us and the research councils to work together to even start exploring a new area of technology. So our innovation and knowledge centres, where Phil and I both fund, they are really good at developing technologies and then spinning companies out of them. So I really see us working even more with the research councils than we have. The Catalyst programmes that you spoke about have been one, 200 million that we've put in, and we've seen $1 billion in follow-on funding already. The latest announcement just helps us to get those companies that have started scaling and really being productive for the UK. So I see this as a hand-off and a hand-back sometimes, and that's the way that it needs to be in the future. Phil, your thoughts?
Certainly. I think as the sort of vision that John's laid out for UKRI, I think is fully supported by the research councils. I think we do see it as a fantastic opportunity to do things still better than we already do them. I think when Sir Paul Nurse reviewed us last year, he was at pains to point out that we were doing a great job, but that we could still do even better. And I think we've embraced that idea very, very positively. So working between councils and Innovate is absolutely critical part of that whole sort of future vision of how UKRI will work. And I think that we do have a fantastic story to tell already. And I think it was mentioned this morning that we have, despite 1% of the world's population, we have, 4 universities in the top 10. We have 17 in the top 100 in the world. Our research base is second to none. And in terms of how we convert investment into scientific output and indeed innovation output now, if you look at the numbers in terms of the per pound R&D expenditure, we're probably top of the world, in fact, in terms of how we convert that investment into scientific output. I think John's point that UKRI offers an opportunity to make a stronger voice for all that within government is absolutely critical, because we could do still more. And I think in the research councils we constantly find excellent work that we just can't afford to fund at the moment. We could do still better, and there's great opportunities if we can get that voice to be stronger into government and make the case more strongly for what I believe is a fantastic system of research and innovation.
Thank you. So John, hearing that, what's your reaction?
Well, I should say that I've been very encouraged. I mean, as I say, when I was asked to do this, we were in a different world. We had a different government. I was asked to do this by a man called George Osborne, if anyone remembers him. So my first task was really to make sure that the case for what we're doing here was one that the new political leadership buys into. And I have to say, I don't want to tempt fate, but I really feel that in wherever you turn, whether it's number 10, whether it's the Treasury, whether it's the new Department for Business and Industrial Strategy, they get it. They completely get it. Now, we'll have all sorts of debates to have about money, about all sorts of really important questions that need to be defined in a kind of post-Brexit world. So there's a lot of detail here, but I do feel they get it, and I'm really encouraged by that. But it's incumbent upon everyone who cares about this agenda to make sure that we have a fantastic case and that we put it well. That's why I really welcome opportunities like this to come and have dialogue with everyone who cares about what we're trying to do here.
Great, thanks very much, John. So I just want to sort of take a slightly different tack, picking up on one of the points you made, Philip, and ask Stian to comment on how do you think the UK compares with other countries in terms of the help and support it provides for innovation?
That's a good question, and I think when we look at other bodies that support or fund innovation around the world, there are a few lessons that the UK can learn from best practice. One great example, and one thing we can learn, if we look at somewhere like Singapore and their agency Spring, they have spent a lot of time focusing on the customer journey of businesses that want to work with government or work with researchers to innovate. They've really ironed that out and made that very effective, so it's very user-friendly. So I think that's one good example of something that we can learn from, and I'm conscious that Innovate has been spending a certain amount of time in the last years doing that already. Spring, I think, are some of the kind of world leaders in that. The second thing I think we can learn from is from places like Israel or Finland. If we look at, say, the Office of the Chief Scientist in Israel, which is often held up as a really good innovation funding organisation, or TechS in Finland, which are they're very good at providing a strategic view of what's going on in the innovation system, identifying priorities, measuring where the country's strengths are, and connecting people. It helps that those are kind of smaller countries and smaller economies, but they're very good at that role of connection. And I think the third thing that I've seen done very well, and I've seen this done well in Taiwan, for example, or in the example which I think a lot of people talk about, DARPA in the US, I've seen countries that are very good at setting challenges and funding research and business development that's oriented towards particular grand challenges. And if I look at DARPA, one of the things they're very good at doing when they provide challenge funding, that is then tied into a whole bunch of other things and aspects the US government are doing, like procurement, like other support, in some cases even like regulatory change. And I think one of the great opportunities for UKRI is to help muster, whether it's the industrial supply chain in the UK and the force of some UK big businesses that can work with smaller innovative companies, or in some cases government procurement and government regulation, to smooth the path and provide opportunities for businesses that are doing innovative things.
Great, thanks very much, Stan. So picking up on that last point, John, how do you see UKRI stimulating some of these supply chains? And Ruth, maybe you'd like to comment as well on that.
Well, I think the general point I'd like to make is that I think both UKRI and in terms of the challenge that we present to the funding bodies, I absolutely want these organisations to be outward facing. I want them to have strengthened relationships with the leading British businesses in these areas, both big and small. And I think having a good feel, a good kind of mental map where the exciting opportunities are, where, as Stian says, the really big challenges are, which is something that matters absolutely to the business innovation end, as it were, but also to what should be the big priorities in terms of what research areas we choose to support in this country. UKRI will not have, we're not sort of going to be godlike people who somehow magically know the right answers to all these interesting questions, but we will certainly be a voice of challenge in the system to make sure the system is dynamic, so that when we think about prioritisation across the system, we are picking up the most exciting areas, the most important areas, and that we are joined up in the way we operate, both within ourselves, as it were, on the kind of public sector side of this, through Innovate and in the research councils, but with the key private sector players. And I would think that a good part of that will absolutely also be alive to the opportunities to attract big international research-intensive businesses to choose to locate activity here, because actually this is a country which can get these things joined up in a way that works for business.
Ruth, did you want to add?
Yes, I'll add a couple of things. In terms of attracting people to the UK to do their own research or their high-level testing and proving of products, the catapult centres, all 11 of them are exactly aimed at that. So that's a very good opportunity for foreign direct investment. When it comes to SMEs, we've already done several things to try and help SMEs. And remember, this is a new population that's growing every year. There's new companies that we need to reach out to. So we are trying to make life simpler for SMEs, and we have learnt something, I think, on the customer journey there. So we've simplified what we do. We're putting in place in the next year 3 things that I think will help. The first one is the Investor Showcase programme, where we bring SMEs to private sector investors to help showcase and get investment from the private markets. The second thing is our Lead Customer programme, which takes a challenge that a large company has and finds a more structured way of encouraging SMEs to apply and help that global company answer its challenge. And the third thing, which I think I've probably just about forgotten, I also mentioned this morning though, it's about making it simpler for companies if they apply for our funding, and we peer review them, they're high quality, but we just don't have enough funds to fund them, to help them by making sure we offer their applications to other either regional agencies or specialist agencies without them having to rewrite the application, so that companies have several opportunities for funding, but they just apply once through us. When we've spoken to businesses, what they want is they want to know life simple, they want to be able to apply once, and they really don't worry, they're agnostic to the structure that provides that funding, providing they know who we are and they know where we live and they know how to apply. So the customer journey, I would agree, has been very important for us in the last year.
Thanks very much, Ruth. So, the UK undoubtedly has a world-class research base, and that's really important at feeding the hopper, so to speak, for the supply chains field. So how do you see your role playing in this broader context?
I think in terms of the general innovation landscape, the research councils and our university system has both sets of organisations have evolved enormously in the last 20 years, really have changed the whole way universities do business, and I think that now we see really excellent partnerships between universities and industry that's been stimulated along the way. In fact, I know BP is one shining example of where that works, and there are many others, really sophisticated companies that get greatly involved in our university system. And in fact, if I look at my own, I should put my EPSRC hat on shortly. I also Chief Executive of Engineering and Physical Sciences in the UK, and we have something like 3,500 collaborators currently And about 60% of those are SMEs as well. A lot of those are collaborating with our universities through our centres for doctoral training. That's one way we're getting smaller businesses involved. So I think that we've moved an awful long way in terms of the way our universities engage with business. I've seen some shining examples of that when I travel the length and breadth of the UK talking to our universities. We really are getting much better at that. I think there's still more work to be done. I think we can still improve it. We can still get better results. The appetite of sophisticated businesses for investing in very early stage research is really remarkably high. We just put out a call for proposals, a bit speculatively. Will business invest in TRL 1 to 3 research, genuinely basic research? We've had a fantastic response to that call, with some really sophisticated businesses talking to our universities, and there's great scope for doing that still better in the future, I think. So, absolutely that whole ecosystem that John referred to, and as did Ruth, is very important that we keep making that work well and improving it along the way.
Great, thanks very much, Phil. So I just want to sort of move the conversation on again slightly more, because I'm conscious this is about an event about innovation, and it's about trade as well. And so we have a lot of international delegates here, who may be looking to make inward investment in the UK. So I was curious, to hear. I think this is something for everybody in the panel to comment on. What would you say to them, to these people who are looking to invest in the UK, about interacting with our research and innovation community? Ruth, do you want to kick off on that one?
I would big up the catapults, actually. And if you don't know what the 11 different catapult centres are, there's a stand outside. We've got representatives from all of them. The largest is high value manufacturing. So anything that is being produced, there will be proving, testing equipment. They are well stocked with technology that SMEs just couldn't buy to try things out. They are open for business. They work with large companies, SMEs, also increasingly training people from research to use them. So high value manufacturing, we have got 3 in the medical space: cell and gene therapy, precision medicine, and medicines discovery. And then in the emerging and enabling technologies, we've got future cities, satellite applications, and transport. And then we've got offshore renewable energy and energy systems. I think that covers all of them. I don't think I missed one. But they are outside, and they will be delighted to talk to you about what they can do for you to help your business grow, and even how you can apply for joint funding to develop a new project or to develop a new technology.
So Phil, I know also that the Research Council are extending their geographic footprint. So did you want to comment on this one as well?
Yeah, I think the great thing about the geography in the UK, if you like, is that we do have excellence distributed across the country, across the whole of the UK, I should say. And there's no doubt that we have really world-class universities. I mean, here in the north, Manchester is a fantastic university. Leeds, Liverpool, Newcastle, Sheffield, these are all great universities. And so it almost doesn't matter where you want to come and set up business in the UK, you will find excellence more or less wherever you turn. You will find an excellent university with a really strong science base almost anywhere you want to locate, which I think is a tremendous asset to the UK in terms of being open for business. So I think that's a very strong message to send.
So Stian, we heard something from you earlier about the international environment. So we're not on our own, we're in a competitive landscape here. So how do we make ourselves distinctive in the UK then?
I think one of the things that is really important about the UK's research system is that we've always been extremely open to the world in terms of partnering on research, partnering on innovation. And that's evidenced by the fact that we are the world's largest destination for research and development, foreign direct investment. The other thing I would highlight to people from other countries looking to work with the UK is that if you're from a developing country in particular, there are a number of policy measures that have been put in place by the UK government over the last few years specifically to fund development-related research or research partnerships between the UK and developing countries, which includes a wide range of countries, and I'd direct you towards things like the Newton Fund or the UK Foreign Office Prosperity Fund. There is funding and money and research partners waiting to work with businesses there, if that's of interest.
And John, from your perspective with the formation of UKRI, how does that overlay and assist in this matter?
Look, I think we're here to do what we can to strengthen the system, but the fundamentals are exactly as my fellow panel members have described. I mean, right at the outset of this session, Stian gave us a list of what the UK has going for it, and I don't think I can improve on his list. I completely agree with it. I also agree with Phil that actually I think British universities have become fantastically good at developing these relationships, and I think that's been a big change over time. I don't think that was the case 20 or 30 years ago, and I think that actually the culture in universities in this country has changed absolutely for the better in terms of the willingness of academic institutions to build these sorts of partnerships with businesses, certainly in this country but internationally as well. Finally, the openness point is incredibly important. It's one of the things this country has a very long tradition of. And actually, whilst Brexit is kind of like a huge issue, we have to find our way through and make sure we absolutely preserve that ownership. I mean, the fact is that it's quite clear that the government does get this. I thought it was really encouraging, for example, on the sort of first weekend of the Prime Minister's time in office, she had to decide what to do about SoftBank wanting to buy Arm, arguably one of our most exciting technology-based businesses, and she embraced it, and the dialogue with SoftBank is actually very exciting. So I think it's important as we find our way through this kind of inevitably challenging period in our national life, that openness, holding on to that openness, making sure that the message is out there in the wider world. The Prime Minister is going to India next week precisely to give this message that this is one of the most open economies in the world, and long may it remain so.
Thank you very much. So I also, in talking about the innovation ecosystem, it's important that we kind of describe it in its full elements. So there's also within that public, private, charitable and regional organisations. So I'm not quite sure who to direct this to on the panel, but I think it's important we cover it because it's a missing. So how are we going to engage those groups in this activity? Did you want to have a stab at that?
Yeah, so I'm happy to, because we work with many other organisations already. I think you'll see we have Alzheimer's Research UK here. We have co-funded with them in the past, and there are many other third sector organisations that we work with, and we run more than 50 competitions a year. 10 of those are our competitions, so every sector we run 2 competitions a year, and we have 2 open competitions for any brilliant new idea. So what are the others made up of? They're made up of partnerships with different organisations who want to put out a challenge or who want to invest in an area and encourage SMEs to put some thought behind it. So anything from vaccines that we've done with the NHS, or any area of new technology. So we work with many other organisations. It's not just the research councils, and it's not just business.
Great, thanks, Drew. Does anybody else want to comment on that particularly?
Well, just to reinforce the point, I think that certainly in the research councils we do an awful lot of work that we co-fund with Wellcome Trust, Cancer Research UK, these other big funding agencies, and we're getting really quite adept at putting together joint packages to address some of the big problems. So again, cross-disciplinary work where, for example, you might need engineering and science and you might need the medicine, you can put together packages across councils with other funders, and we're increasingly working like that as the problems that we're tackling become broader and bigger, if I can put it that way. So we do an awful lot of work in that sphere already, and we'll again try and grow that in the future, I'm sure.
Great.
Just to put that in some international perspective, NESTA, my organisation, our aim is to promote innovation for the public good, and we work on a lot of technological and innovative projects with charities and third sector organisations generally. And I would say that in my experience, the UK's charitable sector, whether we're talking about foundations like Wellcome or even membership organisations like the Alzheimer's Society and Diabetes UK, are on the whole more open to innovative methods of service delivery and trying new things out and trying out new ventures than most of their counterparts that I've seen, certainly in continental Europe or in the US. So I think that is, if that is something that you as innovators are interested in, the UK is a really good place to do that, not just because of the research strength, but because of the strength of the kind of institutional partners as well.
Great, thanks very much.
I completely agree with that, and it is, it's an astonishing historical accident that we have in this country, some enormous charitable organisations that are massive research funders, and that is, we should always remember that these institutions have a choice about where to spend their money. They choose. Wellcome is the biggest example. They choose to spend the bulk of their money in the UK when they could spend it, all over the world, and that is. Therefore, for me, having, as I do, a very active dialogue with organisations like that is incredibly important. The thing that I think we can do as UKRI is, we need to be the organisation that is, for sure, the sort of custodian of, spending $6 billion a year of public money in this space. But actually, that sits within this whole wider ecology. A massive amount of private sector R&D, what the charities are doing, what government departments do. We need to be the organisation that has a really good picture of what that all adds up to. Where are the exciting areas? Where are the big challenges? Where are our biggest areas of strength? Where are our weaknesses? What are the choices that we need to make? And that absolutely needs to be informed by the choices that other big partner organisations are themselves making, and that map doesn't really exist at the moment. And my organisation, once it's kind of up and running, absolutely has to be the organisation that develops that map, that works with others to do so. And I think having that will itself be a really useful contribution.
Great, thanks, John. Well, thank you to the audience. You've been incredibly patient. So I wanted to open up the floor now to give people a chance to ask any questions, and there's a roving mic, so I can see a question here, and we might take these in groups of 2 or 3 just so that we can think about how we address them. So go ahead, please.
Hi, it's Rufus speaking from MSc R&D. Congratulations, Ruth, on the move to offer applicants to grants another option if their project's not successful. If you could pull that off, that would be brilliant. But I just want to ask, after the sort of the confusion last year with the changeover from to the new match funding programs, whether you could confirm that the financial year, next financial year 17-18, will see the same sort of amount of and program of match funding with the 4 priority areas and the open competition. Will that be the same next year? It will. Thank you.
That's an easy one.
Yeah, I'll just take that one straight away. So, yes, match grant funding will absolutely be our mainstay. We will be sticking with our 4 sector areas and the open competition. Always we will do more things on top of that, but that won't change. Okay?
I saw another hand up at the back, and there's one here. Yes.
Hello, Michael Pemberton from Trafalgar Marine Technology. I make concrete float, and I would like to ask very simply if Dr. Ruth and Dr. John will have an appointment with me after this session so that I can explain the frustrations of innovative and disruptive technology trying to get through your gatekeepers, and that would be helpful to you and helpful to me. Thank you.
Okay.
Have we got an appointment after this meeting?
Another direct question, so
I'm putting you on the spot.
So, and I'm going to do what all chief execs do when they're on the spot. I'm going to ask the person who really knows about concrete and materials and manufacturing to meet with you, because I think that would be a better conversation than meeting with me. And if you don't get what you need from him, then I'll try and get you later in the day.
Great.
Okay.
That's true. That's a very good answer. Can we pick up this chap at the
No,
back?
I'll see you. Stay there. I'll see you. Don't worry. Don't you worry.
There's a chap at the back who's been patiently had his hand up.
Hi, Stuart Davies at Augean and the Innovation Advisory Board for NERC. I think this is a friendly question. So we talked about the context very helpfully discussed by the panel. several times it's come up the importance of either inward investment in research or hanging on to the international companies that are UK based, so several people have referred to that. I'm interested in whether you think that that is a critical success factor that UKRI in its new form should be measuring and would be willing to undertake to turn into a positive story and not a defensive one. And secondly, what outside of UKRI do you think government should be doing to drive that investment in UK research forward?
That seems one top of you, John. Yeah.
So the answer to your question is absolutely. I do think it's a critical success factor, and I'm quite happy to be judged on that. I think it's a really important measure of our success. In terms of what else we should be doing, I mean, that again is kind of my problem, because I think that in setting ourselves up as the voice of research and innovation, it's immediately obvious when you think about this system that actually our success is shaped by all sorts of things other than the levers that I or the funding organisations within UKRI will themselves hold. I mean, all sorts of issues, I mean, certainly the new trading relationships that will be struck around the world, issues around free movement of people, things like visas, all of those sorts of things. I mean, a list as long as your arm, obviously, is important. And a whole bunch of sector-specific issues. Now, we need to be, we won't control a lot of those things, but we are in a unique position when we get going to be the sort of rattler of the cage on some of these issues, the advocate, the person who's the people who are sort of going and talking to, let's say, for the sake of argument, the Home Office on the visa regime. For sure, I dare say we will be having some important discussions there to make sure that as the regime evolves, that is got right, and the things that matter to all of the organisations in this room that employ people from outside this country, that's going to be hugely important. So there'll be I picked that as one example. There'll be lots of examples, and I think we won't be able ourselves to deliver on all these things, but we will be the body that needs to be putting the case.
Great, thanks, John. So I'm looking at the clock at the back. I see there might be time for one more quick question if anybody has one. So I think there's a choice between, I don't know who was there first. Yeah, person at the back there, I think.
Thank you. My name's Roy Sandbach. I work at Newcastle University and I am on the Innovation Board for the North East LEP. I'd like you to give me some perspective on place-based innovation from the view of Innovate UK and then also from the view of UKRI. Thank you.
Okay, sounds like Ruth.
Okay, me again. So place-based innovation is really important. You may know that we map where all of our grants are won, and you can see it on our website, and actually they are won pretty evenly across the UK because we fund businesses primarily, and there are many centres for different types of businesses in different places in the UK. It comes up with a pretty even map that looks quite different from a Research Council investment map. As you probably know, we have recently put in place regional managers so that it's easier for businesses to get access to what Innovate UK does and how we work with our partners, not just through some kind of nebulous network or some electronic system, but also through a regional manager in your area. Now, for the North East, I happen to know that it's Dean Cook and he's here today, so if you don't know Dean, you can find him. But for people from other parts of the UK, many of the regional managers are here. If you can't find one, actually Liz, who is chairing this session, knows who they all are and can put you in touch with them. So we will be doing much more regionally and locally, and to help us with that, what is now the Innovate UK Knowledge Transfer Network, one of our partners in our family, they will be working much more closely with us in a regional way to highlight our competitions. Of course, they've always done work like this, but actually it's going to be a much closer family, and we will be trying harder to get to SMEs on a regional basis. So thank you for that question. I couldn't have been happier.
John, do you want just for a quick reply, yes, and then we'll close.
So I do think the answer is different on the innovation side from the research side. On the innovation side, I completely agree with what Ruth has said, and I have nothing to add to it. On the research side, the UK has a long tradition, which I completely believe in, of ruthlessly and rigorously funding the best research wherever it is found. And I am an unequivocal believer in that. I think it's served us well. And there are countries that have attempted policies of spreading research money, you know, on a more sort of jam for all type system, and it hasn't been a happy story. So I think we have to be quite careful about that. Now that said, I also think UKRI needs to be the custodian and the sort of believer in, you know, making sure that the system truly is dynamic. Because I don't think any institution or any part of any institution has a sort of divine right to be funded just because it always has been funded in the past. I think that has to be earned. And I think we do need to be the voice of, you know, it needs to be a genuinely dynamic system, and we need absolutely to have a good understanding of where the up and coming opportunities are, which may be all over the country. And it goes back to this point I was making about having a kind of a really objective map of what are we really strong in, what are the exciting opportunities, and we should be challenging the research councils to make sure that the system isn't sort of silting up, and that, as it were, you know, areas that may once have been great but possibly not quite so great now aren't, you know, outleaving their usefulness.
Great, John. Thank you very much, and my thanks to the panel and my thanks to the audience. There's never enough time; it always seems to go very quickly. But thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.